Dan, I have to admit I've been more interested in life in theology than in religion in terms of the reality, is there a God, as opposed to the sociology of how this concept has been institutionalized. But we have to face facts that religion is an extremely important part of the way people think about this world. How can we begin to think about religion? Let's start with a definition. How would you define a religion?
Well, I define religion as belief in a supernatural agent or agents whose approval is to be sought. Now, once I've defined religion, then there are some things which look like they're religions that don't meet the definition. Okay, so they're former religions, or they're pseudo-religions, or honorary religions. I don't care particularly about the definition. Seems to me to capture the most important thing, that is the belief in a supernatural agent, and a good one. That distinguishes it from simple superstition, for instance. If we understand that as what religion is, then the question of whether God exists, whether such a supernatural agent exists, is actually, I think, of less importance than to the modern world than maybe it once was. There's lots of arguments for and against the existence of God. I don't know many people who care about those arguments, even who know them. I don't think it convinces anybody. And people say, that's not what's important. Okay, what's important? What's important is not the theology, but the institutions and the loyalty and the tremendous sense of love and allegiance that people have.
And the claim that it improves our lives and our families and our way of our well-being and all of those things. All right, so there are a lot of counter-arguments to that too, all the bad things that religions have done, but some people would say that on the whole it's better rather than worse. But rather
and I'm
than...
not necessarily one of those. I think the jury's out on that. I'm simply agnostic about whether religions have done more harm than good, and will continue to do more good than harm, or harm than good.
But what you would like us to do is to subject the religion to some analysis so that we can understand both its origin, its current situation, and maybe predicting where it would come if we really understand it. So
exactly.
So let's make some progress on this. If we're going to do this, and I think that's a legitimate exercise, no matter what your fundamental belief should be, I mean, it should be subjected to these kinds of analyses. What are some of the methodologies that we should begin to think about looking at a study of religion?
Well, I think we have to think not just historically, but biologically. We have to realize that Homo sapiens, us, we descended from earlier hominids. We share a common ancestor with a chimpanzee going back about 6 million years. A lot has changed. And as Darcy Thompson once said, everything is the way it is because it got that way. So let's look at the history as best we can. We have to do a lot of extrapolation and some speculation and see what religion adds to the mix that makes us so different from all other animals. And I think we can do that. I think we can see both what its origins were in superstition, which grew out of an overactive adoption of the intentional stance. When it's something, and this, by the way, is a mammalian feature we share with say, dogs. If your dog hears the thud of snow falling off the roof and jumps up and barks, the dog is in effect asking who's there. Not what's that, but who. It's assuming there's an agent, might be a dangerous agent out there. This assumption that when something surprising, unexpected, puzzling happens, to treat it as an agent until you learn otherwise.
That's the intentional stance.
That's the intentional stance, and it's an instinct. Not just in us.
And it's an appropriate one.
It's an entirely appropriate instinct.
I don't want to get eaten if I'm running around on the plains.
It's on a hair trigger.
And so it has to happen instantly or it's not going to work.
That's right. You don't want to wait around. But if you want to fire, have a lot of false positives, a lot of false alarms.
Right.
Now, in the dog just goes back to sleep after a minute. But we, because we've got language, we mull it over in our heads, and pretty soon we've conjured up a hallucinated agent, a little forest god or a talking tree or an elf or something. Well, what made that noise? Now, mostly those are just harmless little quirks that we have in our heads, and we soon forget them. Every now and then, one comes along which has a little bit more staying power. It's sort of unforgettable. And so it grows, and we share it with a neighbor. And the neighbor says, "What do you mean? A talking tree? No, there's no talking trees." You say, "Yeah, I could have sworn that tree was talking." Pretty soon, the whole village is talking about the talking tree. Maybe they're all saying, "It's crazy, no such thing as a talking tree." But they're all talking about the talking tree. The talking tree idea has entered the world. It has made multiple copies. Everybody in the village has a copy of the talking tree idea. What's it for? It's for itself. It just happened because it could. It's like a virus.
And it may be from time to time that one of these little quirks gets randomly reinforced by, I don't know, a good fishing catch or some animal, and then suddenly the good result is like an operant condition back to that little quirk, and it gets expanded.
In fact, B.F. Skinner did some experiments with pigeons on just that, randomly reinforcing them, and pretty soon they were doing quite elaborate little dances. And sure, this isn't religion. This is just superstition. And it melds perfectly in with their lore, their physical lore, their natural lore. But sometimes they get the idea, well, if you say a little prayer to the talking tree before you go hunting, then you do a little better on the hunt. And so it goes. And the line between good lore, I mean true, accurate lore about where the food is and so forth, and the sort of embellishment is, they don't draw it. They don't think of it as a religion. And gradually these ideas, which naturally infiltrate into their community and get copies in all the heads locally, they sort themselves out. There's competition. There's only so much room in people's heads for these things. And the ones that are unforgettable, the ones that really are catchy, will get copied and passed on and passed on and passed on.
These are the memes.
Those are what Richard Dawkins would call memes. That's right. They're cultural items that reproduce in people's brains.
And their only purpose is their own propagation?
What are they for? They're for themselves. It's like when I first started studying religion, people said, "Oh, an evolutionary account of religion. What do you think religions are good for, Dan?" They got to be good for something. After all, every human group that's ever been studied has some kind of religion. And I said, well, yeah, every group that's ever been studied has the common cold, too. What's it good for? It's good for itself. And these ideas are just good for themselves. They're good at reproducing in minds. Whether they're good habits or bad habits of mind, they're good at reproducing in minds.
In one sense, that's a neutral comment. It's
that's
not
right.
positive
that's
or
right.
negative.
Now, those are, if you like, the wild memes, because they don't really belong to people. People don't take care of them. They're not. Now they're going to get themselves domesticated. And now, just the way sheep acquired shepherds, and it was very much to their genetic benefit. There's millions, hundreds of millions of sheep now. So some of these wild ideas got shepherds as well. They got stewards. They got people who would devote their lives to spreading these ideas, to protecting them, to teaching them, and so forth. Now we've begun the domestication of these wild memes. And that's where we get organized religion. Now that telescopes a very complicated story, but the main step is it starts out as it were, wild superstitions that happen just because they can.
Yeah.
They're exploiting, they're getting in the cracks of our cognitive machinery. Then they're around, they can be used. People begin appreciating them. People begin to use them for other purposes, and now we're on our way to organized religion.
So the uses of it might be with individuals who have some belief, but then find that the reinforcement for their own careers or their own status or their own something or other is enhanced.
Not only that, but of course parents saying, even if I'm not watching you, the rain god is watching you. all kinds of uses for these ideas.
And if the children are then better behaved when the parent is not there,
Exactly.
and that helps the community
Sure.
because they're better behaved,
Yeah,
that's reinforced.
that's right. And so it goes. And so we have a multi-level process of competition and selection. And one of the things a lot of people don't realize is there have been not hundreds, not thousands, probably not just hundreds of thousands, there have probably been millions of religions that have started since religion started. Almost all of them are extinct. Sects start every day. More than the websites can keep track of. Most of them have a life of days, weeks, a few last for years, sometimes a generation or two, then they go extinct. This has been happening not just in our century, this has been happening for thousands of years. And the ones that we see, the ones that have the big budgets and the big churches and the history of music and all the rest, those are the hardy survivors of a very large competition.
Some would claim that they're the legitimate ones, therefore they have survived and grown.
Well, they can't all be legitimate because they disagree completely on what's
another question.
What's at the heart of them. But so we need something aside from legitimacy to explain their power to hold people's allegiances, because only one of them could be the truth, and the other one's just as strong allegiances.
You make a very interesting comment that if we value something, we have to value it for a reason, which sounds obvious, but is a methodological window to begin to explore different ways to determine value.
Yeah, I think one of the things we learned from biology is that nothing persists over time unless it, to put it crudely and crassly, unless it pays for itself. It has to pay for itself in winning some tournament of differential reproduction. Now, it may be at the gene level, it may be at the organism level, it may be at many different levels.
Group level.
Could be at the group level. But something has to explain its persistence, because things don't just, complicated things need maintenance, they need renewal, they need repair, they need replication. And all of this rebuilding and replication and replacement and repair takes time and energy. And so something has to pay for it.
What are some examples of different ways that religion can be valued through this process? You've used an analogy, for example, to our desire for sweets.
Yeah, the sweet tooth. Yeah, it's a nice example because it seems obvious first that we like sweet things because they taste so good.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's really the other way around. They taste so good because we like them. And there's a deep reason why they should taste good to us, because they are a great energy source. And they co-evolved, sweet things, sweet fruits, ripe fruits, for instance. They co-evolved with our love of them. It was a bargain between fruit-producing plants and frugivores like us and like all the other animals that eat fruit, and they get more energy from the ripe ones, and so they have evolved a preference, and that's our sweet tooth. Now, on top of that, think of what we've built. We have the world of confection and sugar cane, and it's a huge international, multinational conglomerate of activity. And there's the dentists and the tooth decay, all of this, all because of this bargain struck millions of years ago between ripe fruit who needed their seeds spread. Now,
with some nice fertilizer around it.
Absolutely. So there's one biological root, and you might say, well, it's a sort of infamous bargain, isn't it? Well, we're the beneficiaries in many ways. It's nice to have that sweet stuff around because we like it, and we like it because it's because we evolved to like it.
All right, so let's draw the analogy to religion.
To draw the analogy to religion is we clearly love our religions. That is, those who do love them, they love them. This is like a love affair. And I think, in fact, religions have evolved to exploit some of the evolved dispositions, emotional reactions that we have to romantic love. It is a point of honor that if somebody disses your loved one, you're ready to fight. Not just, I beg your pardon, but those are fighting words. That aggressive tendency to protect and defend the loved one makes perfectly good sense biologically if you just think about competition for mates. That it would be harnessed by religions is not so obvious, but I think it's clear. And why are religions such storehouses of beauty, of visual beauty, of musical beauty, of architectural beauty? Why do they? This isn't an accident, of course. This is design. Because religions have evolved to appeal to our sweet tooth. In this case, our love of beauty, which almost certainly has its genesis in sexual attraction. So it's all sublimated sex, but not in the way that Freud thought. So if we think about all the features of religions from a biological, more particularly an evolutionary point of view, we see lots of design features that are otherwise sometimes a bit baffling, I think. And I think that these features haven't been, as it were, consciously, deliberately designed for the most part by, clever priests, say. No, it's just that the religions that happen to have this mutation did better than the religions that didn't. And so they spread themselves better than the religions that didn't have them.
What are some specific examples or analogies of how religions have mimicked, if you will, some of the other biological characteristics of evolution?
Let's take a sort of scary example. There are lots of parasites that depend on manipulating the host body that they enter. And one of the things they do is to get more energy for themselves by destroying the sexual organs of the parasite. They neuter their host. Gee, I wonder if we ever see anything like this in religion. Certainly the celibacy of the Catholic Church would suggest itself as a case where you get the full attention and energies of a certain group of hosts by more or less cutting off what otherwise they might spend a lot of energy on. Of course, it doesn't work all that well, does it? Right. But there would be an example. But there's many others.
What kind of next steps do you think would be productive for human society to make to understand religions?
Well, I think first of all, we have to do what Socrates always told us to do, and to realize what we don't know. The fact is, we don't know a lot that we think we know about religion. And I'm saying, I don't know it, and I'm saying nobody knows. And we jolly well should try to find out using good old scientific methods. We can't just rely on our good intentions, and good intentions aren't enough. And we can't rely on tradition, because tradition isn't good enough. Let's find out what makes religions tick, how they attract people, and then we'll have some idea of how to build on that. Now, there's a lot of people who've tried to reform their religions in the last, say, 100 years. Some of those reforms were disastrous. Why? Their intentions were fine. They didn't understand the nature of this sort of organism that they were trying to fix. So it doesn't matter whether you think religions should go extinct or should become stronger. You should try to understand how they work, their physiology, if you like, their ecology. Now, if you look at religion now, you see hugely different from what it was 100 years ago, which was hugely different from what it was 1,000 years ago. What's religion going to be in 10 years? It probably will evolve as much in the next 10 and 20 years as it has in the last 100. I'd like to be part of a planned attempt to channel that evolution of religion down paths that are socially useful.